Hey everyone, I just wanted to record, this sort of brief video that where I work with this notion that you are looking right now. So ecofeminism, and I think it's really important that today and every day, actually, we think about it and how is it important or how does it translate in our regular lives. Well, I wanted to share with you what do we mean with this notion of ecofeminism. So the first thing that I want you to imagine is, or question yourself is, have you ever used this notion of mother nature, as a way to talk about nature itself? And why do you think that is? Why do you think we associate the idea of a mother to our planet Earth, to the environment, to nature itself? Well, as you can see, some image representation or some even maybe songs or sonnets, even poems, we have used the idea of nature as some sort of association with women, right? So you can see, for example, how some poets see beauty in nature just as in a woman, but they also see fertility, as you can see on this picture. And you might be wondering, well, what's wrong in doing that, right? All right, so think of this quote that I found really interesting. Now, think of the very language we use to talk about the world around us. For example, we have a fertile land, a blooming sweet earth, but also that we expect nature to reproduce. Now, isn't this the same language we associate with women, that they're fertile, that we expect them, to reproduce? Think about it really closely because you can see it not only, in our mental representation, but also in literature. For example, in our ancient Greek mythology, particularly with Hesiod, we see that at the beginning of, the creation of the whole cosmos, first was chaos, and then the white bosom earth, or or the name Gaia, which also is also associated with this goddess. Now, as you can see, the characteristic that Hesiod wrote about Earth or Gaia is white bosom, which is also a biological characteristic of woman. And it's I wouldn't think that this is um, without any reason. So in ancient Greek, women weren't able to have all of these rights as male citizens did. And also they have a specific gender role, which was, the idea of the home and the purpose of rearing children, which as you can see is really connected also with the idea of earth and this important aspect of how it is described in Hesiod. And also think about this quote that you are reading right now. We use these symbols, planet, Earth, Mother Nature. We also think about gods, not only as a way to describe, aspects of our world, but they also represent and set up, the differences, the frontiers of reality. We with them, we also affirm what must keep on being and what should be and at the same time it is in them that we normalize and validate inequality in every kind in inequality. I think this book does a great work by showing us how several intersectionality problems can be analyzed through it. And not only that, but we also create different categories of person, and these categories are cultural constructs that are based on certain biological or social characteristics. And think about, for example, movies that we have used, for example, Tarzan. If you ever seen Tarzan, you know that Tarzan's family, real family, well, they die, they are killed by a tiger. I forgot his name, but Tarzan is rescued by what he considers to be his mother, Kala. And in this movie, you can see her as representing the role that he never had, a mother. So she is Tarzan's mother in a way, not maybe sanguine, in bloodline, but maybe as a role. And what I want you to see is the last sentence particularly that says the mother-child relationship might be precarious, but she's always there for the child. So Carla, as a mother who doesn't understand what is it to be a human being, is always, trying to make sense out of it and maybe having some troubles along the way, but she is always there for the child. And I also think of this, last sentence when you see the mother-child relationship might be precarious. Also, change instead of talking about mother-child, think about nature and child relationship might be precarious. For example, climate change, droughts, all of these natural phenomena. But she's always there for the child. We will go back to this idea in future slides, but it is important that you also see it. Now, the other, female that appears on the movie of Tarzan, it is in this case Jane. And Jane is also an interesting character because when she appears, you know, the movie tells you that she wants to make science just as her father did. But at the end of the day, what was her role in Tarzan's movie? Well, at least in this movie, her role was to strengthen him and kind of giving some sort of social life-giving force. So instead of looking at her as a woman striving for her own desire and so forth, no, she is pushed back to the idea of being also a woman who has a passive role, of nurturing emotionally, of educating Tarzan and leading him to the point where he actually gets closer to a civilized man. And just as I was telling you before, think of Carlos reading, this previous reading where the mother-child relationship might be precarious. I think also this quote about climate change deniers. So most of them, when they are arguing, about climate change, they think of the planet Earth in a similar way as, as if our planet acted as a woman or as the idea that they have of a woman. And then they say, for example, whenever you do something mischievous, when you do something that it's not right, of course you're gonna expect your mother, to maybe punish you, to talk with you in a different, tone. But at the same time, that at the end of the day, she's gonna forgive you. She's gonna give you her love. She's gonna accept you as you are because you are her son. And climate change deniers have a similar, psychological understanding of the problem because they see, of course, maybe we're having a little bit more, global warming and maybe more death, maybe more drought, but don't worry about it. The planet has gone through climate change forever, and we are gonna go back to a natural or a natural moment, and all of this will go away. So this, mental understanding of the problem can be seen also as really tied up with the idea of a mother. And that's the first thing that we need to get rid of. Nature doesn't behave as a mother. Nature is something other than a mother. Maybe that's one of the reasons that a lot of people have, this trouble understanding. But not only that, as we were looking at some of quotes before about symbols, now think of Mother Nature and see how does it keep on painting a certain idea of the role of a woman, of a mother who just planet Earth. We're exploiting her to the point where she's no longer able to sustain all of the rest of of her, let's call it brothers and sisters, and meaning the biodiversity that we also have. And what is it happening? What's happening with that, or another way to put it, is that this also happens when some some people, think of the same phenomena as with women. There is some devaluation process, and there is a constant reinforcement of the stereotypes where, if we compare these ideas of modern nature, woman, we're going to keep on, as you saw in a previous quote, not only normalizing this particular devaluation and reinforcement, but creating these lines of how they should stay within those limits. And that's a problem that ecofeminism points out, and I think does a great work at signaling. Of course, it's way more complex than that, because it's not only about dualisms and binaryisms. That's another important aspect that might be missed by the initial ecofeminist movement. But I think it's really important to see how these notions, open up our understanding of the problem. And we can also see these comparisons, for example, between animals and women. So in this article by 3D Mas, you can read with further detail some of the aspects that I found was are really important, and we should start criticizing. So when we see these comparisons, or even in our imagery, with this, for example, Catwoman in this case. So when we associate cats with the idea of a woman, we have these particular characteristics: the idea of the feline, the sensual, the slinky, the mysteriousness, and all of this is really associated with a woman and a cat. That association is the most important one. Now, think also what would happen if we associated a man disguised as a cat. We don't have any superhero that I am aware of that is, that has these specific characteristics. I'm pretty sure that if we ever thought of a man disguised as a cat and maybe as a superhero, he wouldn't be feline, sensual, slinky, and mysterious, but he will be maybe something else. And that's why we have to ask why cats and women are associated like this. Why animals and human beings have these characteristics in our own symbols and representations. But not only that, this article says that yes, so women are sexualized, but at the same time, men, when when thought of animals, they are seen as ennobled. And ennoble means basically when we put them on a higher level. So think, for example, Batman and Catwoman. So they both are seen or are represented even in their superhero costumes as animals, right? And whilst Catwoman is sexualized, Batman is seen as someone that strives for justice, maybe through vengeance, but that's okay. We normalize, his whole violent act. Of course, he doesn't kill, but he might use his fist up to, a point before actual death. So all of these elements are really important, and we need to question ourselves, where do they come from? And also, how do they impact the problems of climate change? And most importantly, our perception of climate change. But also think, for example, why do you think Bruce's parents had to, are essential, to the Batman story? Why is Batman's story enough to ennoble his search for justice or vengeance, and at the same time, accepting his whole violence, his trespassing of the law, and so forth? Why is it that all of these matters are more validated through, manhood rather than womanhood? And why is it, for example, that right now within, our whole feminist movements, the mothers that are trying to look for the search of justice of those who have perished along the way by men who committed horrible acts, why are they seen, as something other different than, for example, a man who would be striving for, justice? There is an important difference that is also represented in this story. So The reason why some uh, authors think this is the case is because of the association between the femininity and nature. Both are seen as a passive thing, as something that happens in the background, as something that is empty in itself, that doesn't have its own purposes, it doesn't have its own meanings, and consequently that whatever that this emptiness is actually filled out by those who actually identify themselves as being the reasonable ones. So for example, when a mother is looking for justice through the police, and the police say, woman, your daughter committed suicide, you know you are just insane, which are normal arguments, sadly, in this discourse. This is what happens. This is just the exemplification of how the mom is seen as something empty, and the police is actually filling out that emptiness because of ideology reasons and so forth. So I think this quote helps us navigate through the problem. But it's not only that something that happens, within our fantasy, within movies and literature. It also has happened, and if we look at the environment, we also see some philosophers and theologians and theologists normalize and justify how the environment is actually a means for us. We are the end of in and of itself, and our environment is that out of which I am just gonna take it because at my own disposal, or just as this last sentence puts it, and this is a quote by the UN, by the way. The rest of nature, living or inert, the rest of nature not being a humanity, or someone else, is part of the world of objects at humanity's disposal. And that happened with, Descartes, and he is considered as one of the main pillars in philosophy. And I wanted just to also let you know that I'm sharing with you this class of environmental thinking so that you can see it. I think it's a really great example of a sort of analysis of this programmatic. She goes through different elements that I think are really important. And I just wanted to share some of the elements that she talks about. So nowadays, whenever you think about the environment and men, for example, we kind of associate also, this how can we call it, this idea of a man, of like not a Nat Geo photographer. And even if you go into Google right now and you look, for example, Nat Geo photographers, yes, you're gonna see some women, but you are also gonna notice that the women that are being taken pictures of them, in the wild, they are not going through risky situations just as the man that you're actually looking into. They are, seeing some in just a regular photography scenario. And I found one of a woman that, she was taking a picture with water, up until her neck. So that was the riskiest situation that I found. And I'm not saying that, of course, that there aren't women who don't go to that scenario, but that in our imaginary, the idea of a photographer, is associated with a man, the idea of the wildlife. And also another idea that is, work in the class that I just shared with you, they talk about meat, and that's an interesting thing because that there's not a connection that clear in our normalized discourse. But I found fascinating how they worked on this idea of meat. No, so just to start the discussion in this aspect, if you Google this couple of words, Festival de Carne Asada, you're not going to see many women cooking. You're going to see, of course, women being part of this festival, maybe some of them eating, but cookers tend to be men. Now, why is that? Don't you think that maybe this is some sort of a right? Uh, I'm not talking about right as instead of some kind of a ritual, and where women, practice their manhood through this activity. And I think this is really connected with this quote that the lecturer talks about, when where gender construction is also really tied up with the idea of food. So being a man, it has a particular identification what real men do. So real men eat meat. The rawer, the better. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about this later on. So I thought it was really important, and there are also some images that you're gonna see in the lecture that are the association of of maybe parts of the body of a woman associated with some animals. And when the lecturer is going through it, she speaks that the reaction of the public when that book was launched. Um, they started talking. We don't understand why the author is making such a big deal out of it. Why can't she see the funniness out of it? And this is a question that you have to ask yourself. Why do you think images where parts of the body of a woman are put in some other elements, or are seen as part separated from a woman? Why are they considered funny? and and this also happens even in short films, in films such as this one. There is a particular scene where Batman actually says something where he is actually looking at a particular part of a woman, and then ignoring her as a complete other human being. And this is an important aspect that this class actually connects with the idea of myth. And what they, if we try to put it in simple terms, whenever you hear someone, a man or someone else talking about a particular part of the body of a woman, what they are doing by that is they are looking at another human being, and then whilst looking at the part of the body of another human being, they are not talking anymore about a human being. They're talking about a couple of legs, a couple of, whatever you call it. And that's a psychological phenomena that they talk about, in this case, as the absent referent. And something similar happens when we think about the environmental discussion related with meat. So whenever you eat, any kind of meat, whether it's fish, chicken, pork, beef, any kind of meat, it doesn't matter which. I bet you that, while you're eating it, you're not thinking of the actual animal itself. For example, if you're eating some chicken wings, you're not thinking that you are eating the wings of a chicken itself. That's not an idea that crosses your mind. Probably you're starting even to feel disgusted by it. Now, why is that? Why do you think that men don't feel disgusted when they have this mental representation of a woman's body part? Now, that's something that has to do with how the patriarchy actually, plays around with these representations in such a way that they are normalized. And it's something that should be, put forward. Because whenever we talk about another human being, we see them as a person. But when you see them just a part of them, you're still talking about that human being. And this is something that happens a lot, when men talk about a woman. And it's something that also happens when, we're talking about food. We don't see the wholeness of that other human, or that other, in this case, living, thing. And this idea of consumption is really connected it's actually even invisible to most of us until you start thinking or adding that face of that other person when you're thinking just about that particular body. And that is why it's really important that we question ourselves whenever we do that of, whether we're a man or a woman thinking of some other person. So, you know, you would, I suggest you start doing that because that's some tricky mental phenomena that we associate also with, this aspect. But, and just to, kind of close up or brief discussion, there's also some men also talking about how, for example, only men, real men, eat raw food. And you would say, how can you even say that? Well, for example, um, whenever you talk with men about and men who know about carnes asadas and all the different, meat terms, they can tell you that the closer that the meat is to, the idea of being raw, has more value than one that is fully cooked. But not only that, there is a stereotype, and which is validated just by this image, that men are supposed to eat meat, just as this study found out. And and I think that is something that we need to question ourselves. Why is that? For example, this video, a man eating, pork face in front of a vegan festival. Why is it that this particular man felt the need to, actually do this? And it is important because of several reasons. But what I wanted to focus and just to end this, what I thought was going to be brief, but it is important that we start, deconstructing these arguments, these ideas, which, by the way, this also happens in front of you. If you are part of groups such as Mercado Libre, you can look in there that there is an actual discussion about a vegan guy, and also a guy that really enjoys eating meat and carnes asadas. So the guy, that enjoys carnes asadas, he made a commitment, with the whole community in Mercado Libre that whenever this vegan guy tried, share the publication related to veganism, that he was going to do a carne asada. And that action out of in itself is just similar as this one. Why is it that we have this need, to like just as if we were talking about, it would seem that this is like a reaction whenever someone is feeling threatened. And that's why we need to stop, those kind of, psychological processes. And whenever you see someone else, question them. Why do you feel that need? Why are you feeling threatened? And the other important element that we need to talk about is that women are more vulnerable to climate change in these different areas, in the social, economical, and cultural aspects. We have some data here that actually validates it, and you can find more information at this UN link. But also, the other aspect of it has to do with how what outcomes do we get from women participating in this, politics. So as you can see in this study, which you can find it clicking on this link, this study found that female representation in national parliament correlates with more stringent climate change policies and lower carbon emissions. And now what I wanted just to end, or this video, has to do with the idea that maybe it's not that we need more women in these places, but that we need to break away from these gender notions that in a way, are part of those other people which are in these representational national parliaments that don't act upon it. It might be more complex than that. I'm pretty sure it is. the case. However, we need to see until what point it's also a gender problem. And that is why I wanted to talk, in this idea, in this brief session of how there are some, discussions related to climate change and gender, which is basically ecofeminism. And I hope that if you, finish watching this video, you actually enjoyed it. And if you want to look a little bit further, I'm pretty sure that you're gonna see how ecofeminism has actually, developed itself, and it's more actual because they're trying to break away from the binaries, logic that they had before all of these elements. But anyway, I do hope that we get to construct a better place for ourselves. And I hope that this a small video helps you, think a little bit, uh, think a little bit more about our mental representations, climate change, feminism, and how we are all part of it. I hope you have a good day. Take care, and please take care of yourself always.